Look at them swing with it, dance so gay with it, chandelier with it. Papa loves mambo, Mama loves mambo. Papa does great with it, swing like a gay with it, loses weight with it. Now he goes to, she goes slow, he goes fast, she goes.
And you develop kidney stones or renal lithiasis just by not moving, which is amazing how everything affects everything in the body. So what about your skin effects and mobilization? You get skin breakdown. How many people do you know that have pressure sores? And if you've seen those before, or if you sit in one area, your skin turns red. After a while, the redness turns into a little ulcer, and before you know it, your bones are exposed and your muscles break down, and that's how you get decubitus bed sores. Everything because you're not moving. You have to always change your pressure on your skin. You can't be in one spot very long because the skin will break down. Muscle strength loss with bed rest. This is something that very few people know. You have to constantly use your muscles. 1 week of bed rest, okay, you can lose 10 to 15% of your muscles in 1 week, which is bad. 1 month, half your muscles are gone. People don't know that. Bed rest is really bad for you. You have to get up and walk. Force yourself to do something. A number of years ago, I had a severe accident where I went head first over my handlebars, landed on my head and my arm, broke my arm with my head. I, broke a bunch of ribs, and the handlebars went into my stomach and lacerated the kidney and so on. And I was starting to develop pneumonia in the hospital. After about 4 days laying in one spot, I said, I'm going to get one of these bugs, and that are in the hospital. I didn't want to get that because that's like a downward cycle to severe illness and sometimes death. So what I did is I forced myself to stand up out of my hospital. The minute I regained consciousness, okay, and I stood up, I said, I can stand. I'm getting, signing myself out of here, I'll recoup at home, And I forced myself to get up. Even my, ribs hurt a lot when they're broken, but I did it anyway because I didn't want to get all the secondary problems that happens when you're immobile. And which is good. I took a few pain pills, but I did it. Now, what happens is your quadriceps muscle, the front thigh muscles and your back muscles are affected first. They start atrophying, so it means you can't stand up, you can't walk. So you can't walk, everything else happens after that, your circulation and so on, everything I'm talking about. So, osteoporosis and inactivity. So, skeletal muscles. Do you know what osteoporosis means? Holes in bones, not as strong. A skeletal muscle mass is dependent on stress placed upon it. Okay? If you don't have stress on bones, they get weak. Gravity and tendon pull strengthens your bones. Okay? So you have to have the gravity. You need to have stress on the bones for them to be strong. There's a study they did with semi-recumbent monkeys. They put them in a chair, like a lazy boy chair, and they strapped them in so they had to just lay there. Okay? They couldn't move. They lost compact bone, which is amazing. Compact bone is what we have in the skull, we have in our pelvis, and everything that's a flat bone is a compact bone. Your legs and your arms are called long bones, your fingers are long bones. They lost compact bone. You also had increased bone resorption, which is osteoclastic activity. The bone cells got reabsorbed very rapidly, and the problem is new bones weren't made, okay? So you were not laying down new cells when you're losing cells at a very rapid rate. So there's a law called Wolff's Law, very complicated, but what does that mean? Wolff's Law means bones get stronger with use. Bones get stronger with stress placed upon them. Use it or lose it applies to bones as well as everything else. You constantly have to stress your bones to keep them strong. Bones adapt to the external environment around them. You have to have linear stress on your bones. Okay? Bone mass, strength, and form respond to stress placed upon it directly. The more stress you put on a bone, the stronger the bone gets. It doesn't get weaker. Lack of bone stress leads to osteopenia, which is less bone, and osteoporosis, holes in bones, and fractures. You have weaker bones, you break your bones. So let me tell you how stress forms on bones. There's areas where the bones are strongest. These are called trabecular patterns, okay? These are the stresses on your hip joints that become the strongest and have the strongest laydown of bone matrices, because that's where the stresses in the linear direction that's standing upright. And you can see them very nicely right here. So this one also shows a little bit osteoarthritis here. You can see the bone lines right here, and also through here, like you saw before. That's where greatest stress is on the hip joint. Bones and bridges. This is a good example to have you understand how bones work. Bridges have numerous supports, crisscrossing supports to increase their strength. Bones have the same thing. They have interconnecting trabeculae. The trabeculae, the crisscrossing supports of the bone, mold themselves directly proportional to the stresses placed on it. So it's not a solid thing. You don't have a bone and it's like right there, and that's where it's going to be. If you change the stress on the bone actually changes, okay? Reforms itself. So it's a constant dynamic mechanism. There's an example of a Brooklyn Bridge in New York. You can see these crisscrossing supports here and also over here, and the arches. They hold the entire bridge up. Just like your bones hold your body up. Has the same mechanism inside your body. How many animals can run a marathon? You'll be surprised here. 6 animals can only run a marathon. And I'll have here. Oops. Oh, go back here. Humans can run a marathon at 12.7 miles per hour, but a horse can only do it at 10.5 miles per hour. So a horse is slower than a human. Fastest ones are an ostrich, pronghorn antelope, and camels. Which is kind of amazing, huh? And sled dogs are also very fast. So falls. Falls are the #1 cause of injury of 65-year-olds and older, okay? The biggest problem is hip fracture. Now, hip fracture is sort of a death certificate because a lot of people end up dying from it. Why do they die from it? Because they can't move. It's a downward cycle, okay? You have 2 times the increased rate of death in the first year after fracture. And 1 in 5 people will die. That's a very high percentage because of a hip fracture. You lose your independence, rapid decline of health. Here's a study of excessive mortality after hip fracture among older women. Risk of death 3 months after hip fracture was 5 to 8 times higher. That's a very high percentage of dying after you break your hip. That's why you have to keep your bones strong. So what are the health costs of a hip fracture? 300,000 hip fractures in the United States, it costs about $1 billion a year, which is a lot, just because of broken hips. That's all preventable. Cost of falls in the United States, $30 billion in direct medical costs. 1 in 3 adults, 65 and older, falls each year. It's another preventable injury. Cost of falls in older adults. In 2010, it's $30 billion. But look at this. In 2020, it's going to be $67 billion. Why is that? People are not moving. They're inactive. They're gaining weight. The more weight you gain, the less active you are. It's just a law of nature. Fat cells don't want to move. They'd rather just stay put, because when they move, they get smaller. They don't want to get smaller. And so that's another lecture I do. Okay. So anyway, it's tripling in 10 years, which is really scary because the health costs are going to go through the roof because of that. So hip fractures are the most serious and costly effect of falls. Inactivity and obesity. If you're inactive and you're obese, the chances of hip fractures increase significantly. You have increased chance of having cardiovascular disease and higher risk of premature death. That's been proven over and over again. So I'll give you a little bit of femoral anatomy here. That's the neck. And this shows you where all the breaks occur, mid-shaft. And here's an example of a hip fracture right through the mid-neck area right here. Then they have to cut it off, they put a pin in, put a whole new thing in. But it's a severe problem. So osteoarthritis progression. One thing that happens when you're aging is osteoarthritis. This is a normal knee joint. It gets thinner, eventually it's bone on bone. I always recommend bicycle riding for that. So you can see hip osteoarthritis right here. It's very painful. Bone developing right here. Even though you've got good trabecular also around here. You start getting arthritis in there. After a while, people end up getting hip replacements. You have to keep them moving. So this is severe hip osteoarthritis, okay? You can see over here, there's no hip joint here whatsoever. Here you can still see it. A lot of this stuff is preventable. So I'm just giving you examples of what happens in this downward cascade. This is a World Health Organization report. Levels of physical activity are decreasing worldwide, everywhere. Non-communicable diseases, which are things you don't catch from somebody sneezing at you, like the canary cough or something like that. Things you create yourself. Cardiovascular disease, heart disease, diabetes and cancer, along with hyperglycemia, hypertension, obesity, accelerating globally. I mean, accelerating. This is a major problem. This is a group of people that actually try to prevent this. He is 81 years old. Does he look 81? He rollerblades every Sunday, and here I am. That's part of my group. We go every Sunday, we go rollerblading or bike riding, about 15 miles. So non-communicable diseases are lifestyle diseases, okay? By 2020, this is amazing. Their contribution is expected to rise to 73% of all deaths. Now that is a huge number. Diseases we create ourselves, but not being active, not living properly, are going to contribute to 73% of all deaths. That's a huge number. So what's the inactivity cost? In 2000, it was estimated at 76 billion US. Chronic disease become a leading cause of death and disability in the United States, along worldwide. It's the most costly and preventable of all health problems. So I've been to lectures, and we've had presenters on certain drugs in hospitals. And they say, okay, we give this drug and it's going to cost $80,000 a year. And your chance of having less problems in your life are going to improve by 3 to 5%. Okay, that's what it's going to cost you, $80,000. Wait with what I tell you when you follow a regular exercise program. Your chance is going to improve by 50%, and it's not going to cost you $80,000 a year. So the cost of chronic diseases and health risk behaviors, okay? Heart disease and stroke, $315 billion in 2010. Cancer, $157 billion. Diabetes, $247 billion. Arthritis, $128 billion. Obesity, $147 billion. Wait till you see the next slide here. Overweight and obesity are turning into a pandemic. A pandemic is a global disease. It's like we have the Black Plague before. This is a pandemic. The obesity in Europe has tripled, and an alarming rate in children as well, okay? Obesity is responsible for about 80% of type 2 diabetes. Diabetes is growing rapidly, especially among children, because they're all overweight and they're not moving. So what's the obesity tax? This is amazing now. Annual medical costs for people who are obese is $1,400 higher than normal people. Take 300 million people in the United States, 40% are obese, that's a lot. Yeah. If you look at different countries, being on a world cruise, you get to see different people come and go, right? So you see different countries. Probably the healthiest people I saw were people are coming from Southampton, going to Cape Town. I was surprised how healthy they ate. They were thin, they were active. But in the US, it's some of the fattest people in the world, you know? And so what is that costing us? You take 40% are obese, you multiply that number, that's 120 million people. That comes up to $171 billion. That's what it's costing us How can we afford to pay for that through our taxes?